my thought as a prosecutor was a lot of these women coming through were prostitutes because they wanted to be there, because they most often, a majority of them had a drug habit and they needed to feed that drug habit somehow. Little did I know that, I will tell you looking back now, there's no doubt in my mind that some of those women that were coming through were victims of sex trafficking and probably put into the trade at a very young age. So, now, fast forward, I'm working on the prostitution cases, see the minors coming through, start working with the Las Vegas Metro, go right along with Las Vegas Metro, we're talking about what we're seeing, and start looking at the statistics. For the last 10 years, Las Vegas Metro, that's just in Las Vegas area, over 2,200 kids have been picked up for prostitution, youngest being 13. And then last year, over 106 kids picked up for prostitution. Now here's the startling statistic. 60% of them were our kids from Nevada. 4 of them, I believe, it was 4, a small minority, were boys. Most of them young girls, the youngest 13 and pregnant. And so now we're thinking, okay, what is happening here? And what we were seeing were these young girls coming in and they were being victimized by pimps. Pimps who were grooming them to turn them out on the street. And it is, once you find out and start looking at what is happening in your community, you cannot walk away from it. I mean, what we are seeing now, and particularly a lot of the prostitution that is going on now in Nevada is through pimping. It's either children, minors, or it is adults, and it's through force, fraud, or coercion. They're being forced into it. It is a very violent world. And here's what happens. A pimp looks for a vulnerable child or minor. They look at runaways, so they will look at the bus stations, they will go to the malls. But it doesn't have to be a runaway. It could be a child from a very nice, loving family who just has low self-esteem, maybe bullied at school, maybe not fitting in, and the pimp sees the child on the school ground. Or you could be a foster child aging out of foster care, because in our state, when you age out of foster care, you age out of foster care. We think you're an adult. When you turn 17, 18 years old, no longer foster care eligibility, we say, okay, sorry, you're out there. We don't have programs, we don't have to help them as between the age of 18 and 22. So they're preyed upon. And I will tell you, these pimps are good. They learn their trade. They know what to look for. They figure out the child that they want, and then they go in. And they start buying the child with clothes, buying them dinners, buying them things that they wouldn't have, telling them things that they would not normally hear. You're beautiful. I love you. I'm your boyfriend. I will take care of you. Giving them a relationship they probably never had before, or probably looking for somewhere because it was missing. And that's what starts it. And then, after they've done all of that, they finally say, well, we got to make a living now. If you love me, we got to help the unit here. So they ask them and turn them out. And that starts down the road. Now that's a true pimp situation. I will tell you there's other situations where girls have been kidnapped. Girls have been forced into it, gang raped to desensitize them so that they can go into the trade. Or girls that have been actually preyed upon by their own family, an uncle, stepfather, sibling maybe, cousin, and then that starts the cycle for them. But there are a combination of them. And for us, one is too many. So last legislative session, through the help of so many wonderful people in our community across this state, we were able to come together and say, okay, how do we stop this? And we really broke it down into 3 areas. We have law enforcement, where we need to go after those perpetrators and help the victims. We have a prevention and awareness campaign that we need to make available so everybody knows what to look for, the parents, the students, the kids, whoever, so you don't become a victim. And then we need services. We need services to help the victims. We don't have enough of those services. And what do they look like and how do we build them? So we started on the law enforcement side and said, okay, what do we need right now to be able to go after these perpetrators and start working to bring some services to the victims? And so through my office, I was able to, and this is unique, in my office I have the ability to introduce 15 bills into the legislative session. The legislature has allowed me to create my own bills and introduce them, lobby them, and try to get those passed through the legislative sessions and signed by the governor. A lot of my peers do not have that ability. So I took one of my bills and created an omnibus anti-sex trafficking bill. It's AB 67. And what it does is create for the first time in the state of Nevada the crime of sex trafficking. And it's just what I told you. Sex trafficking is illegal for a minor. And if you are an adult and there's force, fraud, or coercion involved, it is illegal. And if you are convicted under sex trafficking crime, there are very, very severe penalties, life with the possibility of parole, graduated minimum times, anywhere from 5 years to 15 years in prison, depending on the age of the child and or whether there's an adult involved. And guess what? No probation. Because here's what happens. You learn these pimps were very good. When they would come through the system, it was very hard for the prosecutors to convict them. Because what they would do, when they were arrested, everybody's entitled to a preliminary hearing in the criminal system. And what that means is, at a preliminary hearing, the government has to go before a judge and put on evidence, and it's usually in the form of a witness, victim testimony, that there is probable cause to bring that charge against the defendant. And if you can prove that to the judge will say, okay, you can bring these charges against the defendant and you can go to trial or you can now move forward. But the defendant has the opportunity to waive the preliminary hearing and say, I don't want a preliminary hearing, I just want to go right to trial. Why does the defendant do that? Because quite often, when we had to prove probable cause, we would get the victim and put the victim on the stand to say what happened. Once you do that, that is preserved. That testimony is preserved so that if for some reason the victim doesn't show up at the time of trial, we can use that at the time of trial. And the pimps knew that. And they didn't want that testimony preserved because they don't want the victim coming at the time of trial. Because what happens is when they waive the preliminary hearing, that gives them enough time to circle back, go back to the victim, and get the victim to recant or not show up, or threaten the victim, or threaten the victim's family. So quite often, we never had that victim showing up at trial. And we can't force them. We can subpoena them and try to get them there, but it's very hard to find someone when they disappear. So, in my bill, we said, okay, if we're going to go down this road, we need more tools for prosecution to play the same game, to go after these prosecutors. Now this was, of all of the pieces in AB 67, this was the fight, because what I originally had in the bill, I wanted the opportunity to say, okay, defendant, you can waive your right, you're entitled to that, but the government has a right to a preliminary hearing as well. And if we want one, we get it. That is a brand new tool for prosecutors in this state.